Well, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored, live from New York City. I'm joined now by the former New Jersey governor and Republican presidential candidate, Chris Christie. Governor Christie, great to have you back on the programme. I wonder if you could just start by giving me your reaction to the fact that 100 journalists were taken into a room and played unedited raw footage of these terror attacks on October the 7th, because so many people, fueled by social media, are simply refusing to accept what happened.
Look, Piers, I think it's a testimony as to what I've been talking about for the past few weeks. The rise of anti-Semitism, both here in the United States and around the world, is palpable. It's been palpable for some time, and it's increasing. And we need to be speaking out against that. There is no other reason to be needing to show this video except for people's disbelief based upon anti-Semitic views and anti-Semitic propaganda that has been put out there not only across social media, but being put out in many of America's colleges and universities. And this is disgraceful, and it is dangerous.
I mean, it's to me beyond doubt that what happened on October the 7th was one of the most horrendous terror attacks of modern times. And if you can't bring yourself to express outrage over it, there's something wrong with you. But the question now is, what is a proportionate response by Israel? And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, other than already within 2 weeks, nearly 3-4 times as many Palestinian, mainly civilians, have lost their lives in retaliation strikes by Israel. That number is likely to massively increase if there is a ground invasion. Is this proportionate, do you think?
Look, Piers, I think the Israeli Defense Forces and their government should have 3 priorities here. Priority number 1 is a retaliatory response against Hamas that severely degrades, if not eliminates, their capability of striking against Israel again. Number 2 should be getting the hostages out, as many of you as you can, both American and Israeli hostages that are being held now by Hamas. And then third is to try to have the response be seen as something by the rest of the world as setting the stage for conversations with the rest of the Arab world about how this type of conduct doesn't create a peaceful situation. In fact, causes great harm to everyone in the region, and begin those talks again. And I think those should be the 3 priorities: an appropriate retaliation, the return of the hostages, and setting the stage for the next round of conversations with Arab countries who don't want to see this type of violence perpetrated against anyone in the Mideast again.
I mean, there are a lot of experts who have long memories from Iraq and Afghanistan. The response, of course, mainly by the United States with the British and others to the terror attacks on 9/11, who believe that if we don't learn the lessons from what happened there, 20 years of mayhem pretty much coming out of our response, that if Israel does go in with a full-blown ground invasion, then it could lead to a far more serious situation than even the one we have in front of us now.
Well, Piers, look, Israel has an absolute right to protect both its safety and its territorial integrity. And the only way to protect that safety and territorial integrity is to degrade the capability of Hamas to do what they did on October 7th again. And the Israeli Defense Forces are going to have to make the judgment about what type of ground force is necessary to protect the safety and territorial integrity of Israel. But that's got to be their goal and mission, nothing more, nothing less.
You're running for president. Donald Trump is still the front runner. Many people think extraordinarily, given he's facing nearly 100 criminal charges. There's no doubt, if you look at Trump's record as president in his first term, as somebody pointed out today, I think on social media, Iran was hemmed in by sanctions, China by a trade war, Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine, Afghanistan hadn't fallen to the Taliban. Now you see a lot of turmoil. Trump never went to war anywhere. Were we a more peaceful world with Donald Trump as president of the United States than we are now?
Well, Piers, I think that's a superficial analysis of the situation. I mean, the fact is that he said he was pulling out of Afghanistan, and that if he had gotten a second term, that's exactly what he would have done. Secondly, he set up the circumstances to give Russia the green light to go into Ukraine in two ways. One, by his constant public coddling and kissing of Vladimir Putin, and two, by not giving the Ukrainians the weapons they needed, and in fact, for a period of time, blackmailing the Ukrainian government and President Zelensky in return for getting dirt on Joe Biden for his re-election campaign. That hardly set the type of posture that would make the Russians think they should not be going in there. And as far as China's concerned, his quote-unquote trade war, this is a guy who said he got the greatest trade agreements ever with China. And meantime, just in the agricultural space, China hasn't, done 25% of what they said they would do and committed to in those trade wars. So the idea that when he calls President Xi brilliant and straight out of central casting, that somehow deterred the Chinese, I think is a joke.
He also called Hezbollah very smart. What was your response to that?
That he's very stupid and selfish. And not only did he call Hezbollah smart, but he also then went and gave a broad-sided attack against Prime Minister Netanyahu while he's in the midst of defending his country in an existential conflict with Hamas. And he did it because Netanyahu had the temerity to be sane and call Joe Biden when it was clear that he had been legally elected the president of the United States. And that's something that Trump will never forgive. And so what he does is rewrite history about the Soleimani operation and other things, because in the end, all Donald Trump cares about is that you say he actually won the election in 2020. And if you didn't say that, or you took actions that contradicted that, then you're his enemy. So now he's attacking Netanyahu in the midst of a war. He's calling Hezbollah very smart. It's because he's very stupid and childish.
I want to play you, Governor, this is a clip of Benjamin Netanyahu from an interview I did with him a few months ago, before all this happened, in which we talked specifically, actually, at one stage, about this concept of collective punishment. Let's take a look.
There have been 88 Palestinians and 15 Israelis killed so far this year. It's the highest rate of deaths in 2 decades. Many are saying that a lot of this is down to incendiary rhetoric from some of your right-wing members of your government. And they particularly cite Bezalel Smotrich.
In any case, they're part of my government, but they're part of my government, and I decide policy.
But do you distance yourself from comments like that?
There are many comments.
When he called for the Palestinian town of Awara to be wiped out?
Of course not. That's totally unacceptable. We don't believe in collective punishment. I go after the terrorists. I go after those who support the terrorists, but I don't believe in collective punishment.
Now, many people think what we're seeing now, Governor Christie, is collective punishment, that thousands of completely innocent Palestinians are getting killed as Israel tries to go after Hamas, who, of course, embed themselves amongst the civilian population. Like I said earlier, that number's only going to increase exponentially if there's a ground invasion. It's hard to see this as anything other than an attack on Palestinians in general, because you can't be selective, can you, in the way that is being currently implemented by Israel?
Well, the people who say that, Piers, I think believe that Hamas should be rewarded for being sneaky. Or Hamas should be rewarded for doing a sneak attack on Israel, killing 1,400 civilians, and then going back and hiding themselves among civilians and thinking that by using them as human shields, they're going to prevent Israel from taking any retaliation. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I think Israel has to take the retaliation. And if Hamas decides to embed themselves with civilians, then those civilians' complaint is against the government they elected, not against the state of Israel.
Should Benjamin Netanyahu stay as prime minister? Notwithstanding there's a war now, the vast majority of Israelis in the polls I've seen think he is responsible for what happened. He always said that protecting Israel and defending Israel was his #1 priority. This has been the biggest failure of Israeli defense that we've seen in modern times. Should he remain in office?
Look, that's up to the Israeli parliament and what they do in terms of a vote of confidence or no confidence in their government. But I would say this, that I think it's very, very dangerous to be changing governments in the midst of an existential war. There's going to be plenty of time, Piers, for there to be an after-action report about why Israeli intelligence and other intelligence agencies failed, if they did, and clearly it seems they did, to detect what Hamas was planning and how they were going to execute it. And it may be that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to pay a political price for that failure. But I don't think the time to do it is now. Israel is facing a threat to their very existence, to their territorial integrity. That needs to be dealt with first. And any political issues that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to deal with because of failings that may have occurred on his watch, well, then he can deal with those after this problem is put down.
Governor Chris Christie, always great to have you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed.